So, in your experience, what are the key security and privacy considerations that engineers and manufacturers need to address when adopting these 5G enabled solutions?
For a long time, as we all know, the operational technology world and the corporate IT world have been separated, whether it's with the Purdue model and firewalls, whether it's with air gapping. As the demand from the enterprise comes to get more data off the shop floor and into the rest of the business on a real-time basis, it challenges the traditional notions of what that Purdue model looks like. It introduces all sorts of possible security concerns that we're seeing the beginnings of that migration, where more traditional enterprise-based cybersecurity principles and best practices are being applied to the OT space. We don't anticipate that the OT world and the corporate IT world are going to completely overlap one another and consolidate. So I resist the term the convergence of IT and OT. I think it's more like the intersection of the two. But the opportunity to borrow from the corporate IT world and apply some of those best practices is absolutely going to make a lot of sense. Because manufacturers are so susceptible to especially ransomware attacks, that seems to be the biggest cyber threat in the industrial space, is one of the things we're starting to talk to customers about is with business continuity considerations. One of the approaches to that is locking down the manufacturing operations. When you look at what happened to a Clorox, for example, and some of the impact that had, if manufacturers have the ability to basically shut all the doors just to keep the plant operating, can you do that? Well, you can do that with a private wireless network. You could be completely self-contained and not rely on outside infrastructure to continue to provide the connectivity that might be necessary. So we see the inherent security capabilities of a private wireless network as an interesting business continuity approach for a lot of manufacturers. And then when you layer in the inherent capabilities that 5G has with respect to security, things like 256-bit encryption and things like that, it has a lot of inherent security built in over and above what 4G has. And part of the message too is that it's very rare, if ever, that a cellular network gets attacked and intruded upon. We don't read about it because it doesn't happen. I think the last time it happened was over 25 years ago. So these are highly secure, resilient networks that in a complete failover type situation with regards to security, the doors to the gates can be shut down and the plant can continue to operate, at least through the connectivity and even the compute side of things. We think that type of technology is going to be an important component of a business continuity plan, not to mention the effects it'll have on normal day-to-day operations.
Right. So when you're talking about these use cases and things of that nature, do you have any pilot projects that demonstrate the transformative impact? Can you talk about anything and how the advancements are poised to shape the future of industrial automation and control?
Yeah, one of the things that I think at a high level that could be considered is that for a lot of manufacturers, seeing what can't easily be seen is so important that when you take something that's 1 million square feet under roof, or even a quarter of that, there's a lot of space, and it's hard to have eyes everywhere. It's hard to have ears everywhere to know what's going on. So while there's a fair amount of surveillance cameras in certain common areas and access points and things like that, understanding what's going on behind the curtain, what's going on in the back corner, what's going on underneath the machine, all these different places where it's a challenge to know what's going on, because those are the types of things that can create a problem. Like, let's take fire detection as an example. And a lot of manufacturers, the high heat at some part of the process introduces a fire risk. So most plants are obviously equipped with smoke detectors and something to understand there's too much carbon monoxide in the air, so let's react to that. However, what if you could capture the preconditions to a fire? If there's a known set of conditions that more often than not lead to a fire, perhaps that's something that can have all sorts of positive impacts Not to mention that it can be partially funded, if not entirely funded, by a reduction in fire insurance and property insurance premiums. And the reason I bring this particular use case up is because when we think about the different new entrants into the space, we're even seeing commercial property insurers start to enter the space where, as part of their policies, they're going to be asking their policy holders, what are you doing for Industry 4.0 and IoT management? Because we want to understand what's going on in your factory so that we're not taking on unnecessary risk. So you've got this whole new constituency or stakeholder in the industrial process that largely was a passive partner before getting much more involved. So we talk about successful use cases. To me, it comes back to that visual notion of how do I know what's going on? And how do I know where it's going on and what's happening and perhaps even why it's happening? So we think that there's going to be an explosion of use cases around video analytics. We also think that when you consider the movement inside of a factory, there's a lot of motion going on. It's not just shop floor operators moving around. There's AGVs and AMRs. There's carts, there's scissor lifts, there's genie lifts. There's all sorts of things moving, forklifts. Understanding where they are they where they're supposed to be? Are they being connected in a way that's enabling them to be smart devices, whether they have a cellular card on board or not? But just understanding all of this motion and making it efficient and making it safe. There's lots of instances where, you know, a forklift operator, you know, they're called by some manufacturers the cowboys, because there's an art to driving a forklift. There's an art to doing it fast and efficiently. But sometimes that safety envelope is really pushed right up to the limit. So as we think about successful use cases, we think of a few things. We think, number one, if the asset in question is in motion, that's a place where Verizon is going to play very well. If the asset's going to consume a lot of data or has a low latency requirement, that's also an area we're going to be able to provide an awful lot of value. But more than anything, we see the opportunity to bring multiple use cases together are what's going to drive that next level of maturity and adoption. So we don't keep this pilot purgatory going on where it get to the end of the pilot, not sure what to do with it, and it kind of languishes and withers. We're seeing customers successfully doing multiple use cases and getting that over the finish line. And one of the great examples to demonstrate successful use cases is we saw one customer, they had an exhibit, an internal, essentially, trade conference with the people who were running the different use cases for the customer. And they brought in 150 employees from the rest of the organization to showcase what these Industry 4.0 use cases were going to be all about, how it's going to benefit the business. And they had the CIO and their VP of Business Services and their VP of Global Manufacturing all speak to this large group. And they were able to socialize all of these use cases in a common place. And it was employee to employee. The various partners involved, such as ourselves, we're witnesses and supporters. We weren't, doing the heavy lifting. It was all the communication going on amongst fellow employees. We thought that was a brilliant way to demonstrate the power of these use cases, but also to change hearts and minds and get more adoption and get more momentum for moving the project forward. One of the things that we're often asked by a manufacturer is, why do I need to talk to Verizon? And because we're traditionally known as a connectivity provider, and some know us as a connectivity and security provider.
Right.
But we see that automation and visibility are the other two major pillars in Industry 4.0. And hopefully through some of the content we've talked about today and some of the material we have online and through engaging with some of our groups, you'll understand that we're able to have the visibility in the automation conversations in support of connectivity and security and be a much broader value-based partner than you might have thought of. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and we're looking forward to follow-ups.
Sounds great. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, Michael. And I thank you for watching. So until next time, I'm Sharon Spielman with Power in Motion. Stay curious.